Okay, so Norm Gronde asks, can you speak of the symbolism of the well? It seems strange nourishment as it reaches down into the deep, but pulls out life rather than chaos. This is because it is intentional and created space. So it has to do with the idea of, so if you want to understand the symbolism of the well, you have to understand the story in scripture where you have the bitter waters. And so Moses comes into the desert and they encounter this pool in the desert of bitter waters. And so bitter waters is salt water. It's not necessarily salt water, but you can understand it as salt water. You can understand it as water that is not palatable for human use. Okay. And so then they put a cross, right? So you imagine they take a tree, they won't put a cross, they put a tree, but I immediately go to the cross, obviously. So they take a tree and they put the tree down into the bitter waters, and those bitter waters then become sweet waters, okay? And so there is a let's say it's heaven that comes down and joins with earth, but there also is a certain sexual symbolism in that relationship. That is, you can imagine, so you can imagine a virginity, let's say, as a certain aspect of virginity, as wildness, as not yet a home, not yet a womb in the sense of a place of life, okay? And so, or you can understand it more like in terms, maybe not as much virginity, but like in terms of the wild or the foreign or the prostitute or the idea of this kind of wild possibility that isn't a home, that isn't a home for human flourishing. And then there's a manner in which it can be transformed or brought into the possibility to be useful, okay? And so you can understand it. There's so many ways you can understand it. And so imagine the difference between a well and salt water is the difference between grass and an apple, right? The grass you can't eat it. It's not palatable for you. You can't eat certain flowers. You can't eat certain things. You can't eat, there's certain things which are just not palatable for human use, but you can eat an apple, or you can eat a tomato or something else that grows from the ground as well. And so that's the idea of the difference between wild and bitter waters and pure water. And so that's what a well is. And a well, because it's also contained. And that also has to do with this idea of constraint on that which is wild and out of control. There's this like containment, and then that becomes palatable for human use. So sorry, that might have seemed extremely abstract, but I think that in this context, this is the best that's going to happen. Well, actually, if you want to understand the symbolism of the well, you can understand it in terms of it's Proverbs 5. Is it Proverbs 5? I might be wrong, but I think it's Proverbs 5, where it talks about the foreign woman, and it talks about the strange woman, and it says the strange woman is bitter and her feet go down to Hades, and it says keep your fountain for the wife of your youth. Don't let your fountain run into the streets, but keep your fountain for the wife of your youth. And so you can imagine that there's a well and there's a fountain, right? So you don't want the fountain to run into the streets and to be diluted and everything. But there's this relationship between living water and the well, and the connection between the two, that's life. And if you read the story of the Samaritan, you'll see that that's the play Christ is making. And so the Samaritan is a foreign, strange, lost woman. She's also a figure of a loose woman in the sense that she's had all these husbands, but she's come to the end of her cycle. She's come to the end, and she's had 6 husbands, and she's had 5 husbands, and the 6th one is illegitimate. And now she has her 7th husband is Christ. And that 7th husband is, now she takes water out of a well, and then Christ offers her living water. And so that's the joining of the masculine and feminine, the joining of the gathering in of the foreign and the strange into that which now becomes palatable. And that's the relationship between Christ and the Samaritan. But it's also the relationship of Christ to everybody else, all of us goys, all of us that are Greeks and coming from other cultures. That's what Christ does to all of us. He takes bitter waters and he transforms them into sweet waters, into a well.